Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nancy Woodrogel with the University of Illinois Extension, and we're very happy to have this partnered outreach with the Illinois Broadband Lab, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities Office of Broadband, and U of I system. We're going to be hearing about the Illinois Broadband Map update today. Really amazing resource and tool that communities and counties use to plan for broadband infrastructure and other projects and programs related to broadband development. And we have back on the platform Shubhika Agarwal, who's really been with us since the inception of this resource. So we're very happy to hear from such an expert at this point to guide us through that. Shubhika is the Assistant Director of Broadband Data and GeoAnalytics at the Illinois Broadband Lab, and she leads data-driven broadband planning initiatives with this tool and other resources and skills that she provides. Illinois, we're very grateful for your time. Thank you so much, Shubhika, and without further comment, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I did go through the participant list and I see a lot of familiar names, so I assume a lot of us have previously used the Illinois Broadband Map, have interacted in some way or format. Just wondering, before I get started, a quick show of hands for somebody who hasn't previously used the Illinois Broadband Map. I think we do have some level setting introductory slides, so we've got it covered, but just want to get a sense of how many folks in the room might not have previously used the Illinois Broadband Map. You could quickly just raise your hand or a thumbs up or okay, I see a couple of hands raised, a couple of thumbs ups going. Okay, so I think we have something for everybody on the call today. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll get started. So we're going to start with a little bit of like how the map has really evolved over time and what it currently looks like. And then most of it is going to be a live demo of the map itself. And then towards the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. But definitely keep putting all of them in the chat as you have a question. If it's something time sensitive, which would be helpful to answer during the demo, I think Nancy or Mike are going to prompt the question to me so that we can have that answered in a timely manner. So getting started with the evolution of the map. So on the left-hand side, this is a snippet of what it currently looks like with the polygon area showing the award areas for Connect Illinois rounds 1 to 3 so far. And then on the right-hand side of this snip, we basically have all of the different subcategories of layers that we have going on the map. So as an introduction, we have created our mapping partner, Connected Nation. They've been working with us from the very beginning, starting June of 2021. And the link here is a little outdated, but it should still redirect to the latest one. So since June 2021, we've been updating the map almost every 6 months. The latest update was end of May 2024. And this is essentially a little bit where Connected Nation directly reaches out to ISPs to collect our own data. And then we work with the FCC data set as well, which is also collecting data from providers on their end. And then there's also additional field validation as required that happens. And then Connected Nation also brings in other third-party data sources that might be helpful in just making sure that we have the most accurate version of the map that we can. So the latest map was updated, as I mentioned earlier, May 31st, 2024. And then we also have some county one-pagers based on the November 2022 data set, which basically go a little bit into what access looked like at those times based on the different technologies. And then there's also information about, prior digital equity or just infrastructure planning efforts within those specific counties. So that might be helpful. A little outdated at this point in time, but nonetheless could be helpful in getting a sense of what access looked like, what county participation looked like when we created those. Walking through how the map really changed. So in June 2021, when we started, we basically had polygons for areas that had different speed tiers and different technologies available. So at that point in time, it was more granular than the FCC maps, which showed data at the census block level. And then it was more recent because they had a longer timeline for updating their maps. Um, at that time. Then moving forward, as we had the FCC Fabric and the FCC National Broadband Maps, that is when we got to a more address level location data set. So a lot of you might be familiar with the Fabric, which basically has all of the serviceable locations, meaning any location that can have or has access to mass market internet service options would be labeled as a broadband serviceable location, a BSL on the fabric. And then there's basically availability data collected at that address level and then posted on the national broadband map. And to some extent, we also have that ability on the Illinois broadband map. So it's definitely gotten a little more granular, more to the address level since we had the FCC fabric released. Since June 2023, we've been using the location data. And then to better understand access at bigger geographies, we've also then uh, just aggregated all of that at the hex bin level. So we'll look at also what hex bin means and how that basically shows up on the map and could be helpful. So just one quick note, this has really been the source of truth for Connect Illinois rounds 1 to 3. But moving forward, definitely want to flag that the PAU selection tool that we will have coming out sometime in January 2025, that's going to be the source of truth for BEAD eligibility or like Connect Illinois round 4 eligibility. So just one important flag there. We just this morning also sent out an email with the list of BEAD eligible locations because we recently had our challenge process results approved from NTIA. So the list of eligible locations for Connect Illinois Round 4 or BEAD, that is now final. If you are an ISP and you already have access to the Fabric license, you could probably use the link here to get to those locations, and then you'll have to just map them to where exactly they fall, because that's basically location ID data that's on there. But once we have the PAU selection tool ready, that is when you'll also be able to visualize all of these eligible locations on a map. But that's currently not the latest that's available on the map. Again, taking a break. Any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. Moving on to what really hex bin means. So now, as I had mentioned previously, we've tried to aggregate some of that data at the hex bin level. So this is basically, there's the H3 global grid indexing system, like a standardized grid that has been developed for across the globe that is being used for this purpose. And it basically is a standard that helps aggregate data at different levels. It's offered at 16 different resolutions. So on the right, you could probably see, that is how they've kind of divided the entire globe into these, and again, available at different resolutions. So on the Illinois broadband map, there's two versions of this. Resolution 6, which is a little zoomed out version, each of the hexagon there covering 14 square miles of area, and then a more granular resolution 9 layer, which is a little more zoomed in and covers an area of 0.04 square miles. So once we look at the map, this might make a little more sense to folks who haven't previously used this. Some version of this also exists on the FCC maps. When we start to zoom out, that is when data starts to get aggregated at the hex bin level. A little bit of insight into how we've done this aggregation. So the data is collected at the location level in most instances, and we're using Fabric version 4 in this current update of the map. The locations are then summarized at, the multiple bin resolutions that we discussed, the H6 and the H9 levels. And then the data that is provided by ISPs is also then, broken down to the locations where they've actually reported access. And then it is summarized at each of the hex bin levels for different speeds and technology types. So when we go to the map, you'll see that we have layers for access by different speeds and access by different technologies. So again, this might start to make a little more sense at that point in time. And also because these are hex bins, realizing that there are definitely multiple locations within a specific hexagon. So when we look at these layers, we'll see that there are hexagons that are colored a certain way because there are certain locations or all locations within that hexagon that have access to the speed or technology that we would have selected. So whenever we click on one of those hexagons, we'll be able to see how many percentage of locations within that hexagon are actually served by the specific speed or technology that we have selected. So if there's any location in a particular layer that falls within that range of speed or technology that we've selected, it's going to be represented that way on the map. So yeah, that was a quick overview of, all the way that we've come from polygons to locations to then trying to aggregate it a little bit so that it makes sense at the county level or maybe the city or village level, really. And a little bit into what that hex bin aggregation really means and how we go about that process. Now, with the updates that we've had, so previously, if you've used the Illinois Broadband Map, so we had a bunch of different tabs going on there with like general, state funding, federal funding, then some more for broadband subscription or like digital equity statistics to some extent, and then more on access. So we've tried to alleviate a lot of that confusion with multiple tabs and layers going on and kind of streamline all of that data into like, more user-friendly format. So moving forward, we've created basically a hub site, which is going to be the home page for a lot of thematic maps that we've planned moving forward. So the first one that we are going to be looking at in detail today is the Illinois Broadband Map. But outside of that, we currently have the project area selection tool map, which is going to be available soon. And again, we'll take a quick look at this in a bit. Just wanted to highlight a few features that have been included in this version of the maps. Again, it's going to be a little more user-friendly widgets that we've added. There's still the address page-based search that is available. You can query data at different geographies. So we know there's like schools, school districts that are involved. There are regional organizations, county organizations. So being able to query access data at some of these geographies, that's still a feature that's available. You can add your own data into the map as well. So if you have a shapefile or some kind of data that you want to bring into the map, that's still a possibility. Provider search looks a little more different, but it's a little more granular, and you can look at the different technologies and speeds offered by different providers in different ranges of distance. You can still print maps if there's something that you find useful. You can clip that and export that into a PDF or a desired format and share that outside of the link to the map itself. There are data layers for download, specifically the ones that pertain to the Connect Illinois rounds 1 to 3, areas that have been awarded. And I think the most important feature is definitely we've tried to categorize layers into more, just easy to understand subfolders instead of all the different tabs that we previously had going on. And you can also search by keywords and also just reorder layers in the map in order to ease, the focus of your search. So on here, I have basically shared slides of where different widgets exist and things like that. You will have access to these slides, so you can look at that later in case you're wondering what some of those mean. But nonetheless, you can also hover on some of these and get a sense of what each of those widgets do. So starting off with the hub side, so this is where we have all of the thematic maps that we'll be developing. You can click on the Illinois Broadband map, and that is when it takes you to this version, starting off with just the published date and some basic information about the fabric license. So you click on agree and move forward with that. To start us off, just again, if you are still interested in reading, I skipped through the splash screen. I just want to get a sense of what that said again. There's the info tab, which kind of mimics some of that information. So it just gives us information for the last date of the published data, the different data sources that are used to get to these access information that's on here. There's also a list of providers by county that you could download, and also a list of all the providers in the state by the different technologies and speeds that they offer. That's also available for download on here. And a few other important links that could be helpful for adoption or the different federal funding programs, and also the Connect Illinois program. So yeah, this could be a good tab just to like familiarize yourself with data sources and just explore additional ones. The next thing we could look at would be the query feature. Again, very important, just a few features here if you haven't previously used this kind of a mapping software. So there's the zoom in or the zoom out if you do not want to use the scrolling on your mouse. And then wherever you are on the map, if you click on the home button, that just takes you to the state level. So that might be helpful in just zooming in and out and navigating through the map. There's also a search for function for specific addresses, or you could just also do a zip code if that's helpful. So just for an example, I do 60607, and that zooms into that particular zip code for me. And then there's a pop-up that shows up on the bottom right here as well. And you'll see now that I'm zoomed into the map, some of these icons start to show up. So to know what's showing up on the map, you could either sometimes look at the legend right here, or you could start to look at some of these layers here. So I know most of these are like CAIs, and you could also click on them because there are multiple layers here. There might be instances where you click on something and here I start to get county information, but I'm really interested to look at what these points mean. So I'll have to go to the next one here. And then that takes me to the point, which is basically a CVS location. So I know it's a community anchor institution, and what I could also do is just bring it to the top if that is something that I'm interested in. So now if I click on any of these, that's going to be the first thing that's going to show up as a pop-up for me. And then if I want to look at other things, I can just continue to use the front and back arrows to navigate through different icons that might be overlapping. So there's that. I'm going to go back to the home extent, and we could look at the query feature. So we looked at the county just in the previous one. As we were working through some of those, we can go to the boundaries file and also see that that's currently enabled. There are also other boundary files that might be helpful, again, depending on your interest. We recently had a request to include the library service areas because we have partners from libraries who also continuously interact with the map. So it would be helpful for them to just have that layer and study access in their particular service areas. So again, if there are requests of that sort, we're definitely open to feedback in making this as useful for you as possible. And again, if this is confusing, I'm not interested in CAIs maybe, so I could just turn this off. And we could similarly do that for all of the other layers as well in the beginning so that we're not distracted with all of the other information on the map. So just turning all of those off. And again, these are like bigger folders. If we click on the bottom arrow here for these, that's going to help expand and give us a list of all of the other sub layers that we have going on here. So again, try to make these subheadings as easy to understand. So this is mostly access by speed. And yeah, so we were looking at query for a bit. For counties, you could simply just click on the map and that gives you a summary of access by different speeds and technology. So right here, for example, with Will County, they have 99.84% of households covered by 25 by 3 Mbps speeds, and that's all technologies, including fixed wireless. But if we were just to look at the wireline technology and how many of those are connected by 25 by 3 or higher speeds, that's 98.59% of households. And similarly, we have those statistics for the 100 by 20, 100 symmetrical, and gigabit symmetrical speeds as well. We could also look at query for one other geography type. So mentioning we could probably look at school districts. So how this really works is you could select the school district of interest. I'm just, for the purpose of demos, gonna randomly select one on here and click on apply. So that's gonna zoom into the specific school district. And when I click on the name of the district on the left here, it gives me a pop-up with some relevant information in the school district in terms of number of students, the bandwidth per student, the total bandwidth, the cost per Mbps. So again, this is all information that's available for this particular school district. And similarly, you could just delete this result and restart your search as well. So that's one example. And you could also just play through other geographies here as well that you would like to query. And some of these would have like different information. So what we saw, the percentage of households covered by different speeds and technologies when we looked at the county boundaries. We saw student-specific information and access that students have specifically for school districts. If we were to look at, for example, Connect Illinois grant rounds, if we want to look at a round 3 project, for example, I'm going to say apply. And then it's going to show all of these to me. I can scroll through the list, and the one that I'm interested in, if I click on it, then this has more information about the counties that are a part of this project, and just a brief intro of what the project hopes to achieve. So all of these have different information that is available through them. So definitely worth a little more of exploring there. Moving on, as I mentioned, you could add your own data. So I don't have a data set right now, but I know school districts having distributed hotspots, for example, if you have that point data available, you could just add that on here and that would show up on the map. So if there's, other data layers that you'd want to interact with and use it, that would be a good idea. Then we have the provider search, which is a little more enhanced with this version. Just want to see if there is a specific address that the audience would like to look at, or a specific county, so we can look at some providers there. If not, I'm just going to zoom into a county myself and then look for provider options. Okay, not seeing recommendations. So for now, okay, I'm seeing McHenry. So I'm again gonna go into my search here. McHenry, Illinois. So that zoomed into this specific county for me. And we can also set the radius here for how much ever larger we want it to be. So for now, because I selected McHenry, it's taken me to the center of the county. And it's set to a 1 mile radius. So we've gotten 331 results. And again, this looks like a lot. This does not mean that there are 331 providers in this specific area, but it's basically all of the providers associated with a particular hex bin. So as I had mentioned previously, a lot of this data being aggregated at the hex bin level. So if you just hover on one of these, you'll see that this AT&T response is basically for the hex bin that turned yellow. And then we have eVergent again for the same one. If we scroll down a little bit, then we'll see these are going into like different hex bins. And if we click on these, then we get a little bit more detail into the type of technology that they offer and what speeds. And you can also go into the provider website. So if this is like a specific residential address that you're interested in, then you can also visit the provider website and get a little more detail about their specific offering. So again, this is a little too big of an area. If you're more interested in a specific address, you could just change this to like 10 feet or something. Or if you want to know a little bit into your neighborhood, then maybe a few kilometers or meters, depending on your interest. So you see now, because it's a more focused area, the number of providers go down, and then you'll get a better sense of who's like within proximity of this specific address. And I see a couple of other county suggestions also coming in. So for other features, I will try and focus on some of those counties mentioned in the chat. So previously we had requests of could we get all of the providers in this specific county and all of that. So I think that's going to be answered through the PDFs and files that we have available here. But if you're more interested at an address level or a neighborhood level, the provider search and the radius that you set for your search could be helpful in getting a sense of who provides service in that particular area. So again, going back to the home extent, just summarizing some of the features that we've looked at so far. We've looked at the info, the query feature. You can add your own data. You can look at providers who offer service, zoom in, zoom out, and just get to the home extent of the map, search for different addresses. And again, depending on the purpose of how you want to use it, we also have a bunch of base maps here. If you are more comfortable with just looking at some satellite imagery and reference text, as you look through the map, you can certainly use those. If streets help you familiarize better to areas and get a sense of what you're looking at, that's also an option. And then there's a bunch more. I'm not going to change it for now, but just also wanted to share the possibility of changing base map so that the map makes more sense to you as you're trying to navigate through different areas and make sense of the information on the map. Moving on, I think we can now look at some of the layers here, which would be a good time to also just explore the keyword search. So I know we've been talking about like different speeds and things, really. So I think in terms of access, again, because of how it's formatted, if I'm really interested in, say, 1 gigabit per second speeds, I could just type that into the keyword search bar here, and that shows all of the layers that have that particular keyword that you're looking for in the layer name. So again, if I typed in 1 gigabit, that might not have shown. So some familiarity with the layer names would be helpful, but I think this kind of worked out. So if I were to just look at areas that have 1 gigabit symmetrical wireline, I select this. And now if I start zoom, and the parent layer, which is access, should also be turned on. That is when it's going to show up on the map. So when I had this off, I wasn't seeing anything. So you also want to make sure that the folder level layer is also checked. So now looking at this and what the colors mean. So this legend symbol here would give you all of the areas in brown, basically have access to gigabit service. I'm gonna choose a county from the chat. So I see Peoria County on there. Let's look at Peoria County for this. So again, I can go into the search. Let's say county, Illinois. Yeah, so it's zoomed in here, the center of Peoria County, and we see all of those areas in brown or orange basically have access to gigabit symmetric wireline service. As I had previously mentioned, if you click on one of these, and again, I want this to be the focus, so I could take this off and switch my access layer to the top. So when I click on anything, that's the first pop-up that I see. So right here again, clicking on these will give us a sense of how many locations within that particular hexagon have access to the speed tier and technology that we have selected. So in this case, 95% of the locations within this specific hexagon have access to gigabit symmetric fiber. And then we can continue to explore other areas depending on, our interest and just look at yeah, what that looks like. But high level, we get a sense of all of these areas to some extent have some kind of fiber or like wireline gigabit symmetrical access. So that's one example of access by different speeds. We can also look at access by technology. So if you're interested in, for example, say cable, so that shows up, it's in the access by technology tab. Turn that on, turn cable on, and turn off my access by speeds. Because again, now if we have two layers going on and we click on something, we wouldn't be sure what we're seeing this statistic for. So whenever you're using any layers that have hex pins associated with them, I would recommend that you ensure that all of the other hex pin layers are turned off so that whenever you click on a specific layer, you're kind of sure that you're seeing the pop-up that is specific to that. So yeah, again, we're now looking at cable and see a little more of Peoria County covered with cable. We had fewer browner areas and more of these. So you can like toggle between layers and just see what the difference really looks like also. And I think, yeah, I'm just assuming that gigabit symmetric is fiber, but that is how it is. So even if you were to like look at fiber and cable and toggle on and off, you could see the difference between the two. And just because these are slightly different, even when these are turned on, the overlay kind of helps us make a sense of cable only and where there are overlaps between cable and fiber. Just wanted to also share the print function at this point. So there's a lot more that you can do here. You can change the size of how you want to export it. You can give it a different name. So in this case, fiber and cable access, Peoria County could be the name. There are other advanced features as well. You could do the current map extent or set a specific scale. I think the current map extent in most cases would make sense. You can also look at what part of the map would really show up in your export. You could add your name, your organization's name, if that is helpful. So I'll just add a place where I'll say Illinois Broadband Lab. If there's any copyright that you would like to include, you wanted to include the legend so that these colors make sense and the north arrow, so that's in there. And we'll have the scale bar and you select print. That's gonna generate results in this tab. And once that's ready, we can click and then download it separately. I've just gotten a few more examples here and ways of how you can use this, and then we'll soon get to questions. So yeah, this is where we have our title. The export looks pretty good. We have the legend, the scale, and the north arrow, and all of these things, and you can then download this as a PDF. So that's one of the features. Looking at some of the other layers that would be helpful. So we were previously looking at CAIs, and I know access to CAIs is also something that a lot of our stakeholders are interested in. So with this one, let me just look at another county example in the chat. So let's say I see St. Clair County. Yes, so it's this in here. So yeah, one of the ways looking at different technologies and community anchor institutions, and then there's a lot of community anchor institutions here. So if you're not interested in all of them, and I probably just want to look at say healthcare facilities and how they are connected. So I could turn off all of the other community anchor institutions, and now these are the healthcare ones that I have on here. And this is what all of those different symbols mean. So now I get a sense of, okay, some of these here do not have access to the technology that I've selected, which I think is fiber. Yes, fiber. So yeah, I think overlay of layers and how you can make sense of these different layers together is definitely something that might be helpful. So technologies and CAIs, technologies and then different speeds, and different types of CAIs that you could look into. That's one good use case of how the map can be useful. Gonna turn these off for now. CAIs can also be wrapped in. And then again, a few really good ones on here. So density of providers. So ensuring that folks have multiple options, so that they're more affordable options as well. You could look at the density of providers that offer greater than 100 by 20 speeds. There's also 25 by 3 and also 100 symmetric. So the darker the blue, the more provider options in those areas. So that might be helpful for some who are like really interested to look at areas where there's high competition between providers and areas where there's just limited options available for consumers to subscribe to. And this is again based on all of the data that's collected through our outreach, integrating that with the FCC data, field validation, and any other data sources that might be relevant. So that's where this comes from. Density of providers, again, that might be helpful. A lot of really good information on state and federal programs. So if we go back to the home extend, I think the first layer that you see on here, this is all of the Connect Illinois projects round 1, 2, 3. So the ones in blue are the round 1 and round 2 projects, and the ones in green are round 3 projects. And again, clicking on these would give you a little more information about them. Similarly, a lot of federal programs here. I think the one that we talk about the most has been RDOF. So again, using the keyword, I'm gonna circle in federal and also the winning bid areas for RDOF. So that again populates the map. Let's see, going back to the chat, say Centralia, Illinois. This might not be the best example looking at RDOF, but yeah, there's in this specific, it's kind of a multi-region thing here with the Kaskaskia College area. So this basically shows not a lot of these areas in Clinton, um, hardly any out of funding there. And again, if you want to make sense of what these colors mean, just clicking on these. So the green areas are the authorized bid areas and the brown ones are what defaulted. So Clinton has none. A bunch of awards in Marion got defaulted. So again, not a lot of out of there. Similarly with Jefferson. And I think, again, if you're seeing something on the map that doesn't make sense, just try and click on it and see. So these are the different towers, and there's associated information that we see on here in the pop-up. So that might be helpful. Going back to the home extent, now moving on to some of the socioeconomic and all of those layers. For example, you want to look at access and income, for example. So that's in the socioeconomic median incomes of households by census tract. And again, this is kind of grayed out right now. If we zoom into the map, that is when we'll start to see some of this data. Again, making sure that the folder layer is also turned on. I'm going to turn off some of these other ones so that I am not confused by what I'm seeing. Okay. And now if I want to compare it to, say, Axis. So what is turned on in Axis? Yeah, I again have the gigabit Y line that's turned on. So if it's important to just see if there is some kind of correlation or just some patterns that you see with the income levels and access to certain specific service, that might be helpful. So in this case, the darker the green, the higher the median household income, and the shades of blue is where it's lower. So in some counties, we've just seen sort of that distinction between high income neighborhoods versus low income and what kind of technology speeds they have access to. So some of these indicators in terms of race predominance, income, and all of those might be just helpful to look at if you're seeing any of those patterns in your specific neighborhoods. And the last thing that I want to highlight here would be some of the layers on access by education. Again, this is from census data. So internet access by different education levels. And again, make sure the parent layer is also turned on. And this is what the legend means. The darker the blue, so that's percentage 25 or over, that who are high school graduates or have some kind of college degree that have no computer. So the darker the color, that's a higher population without a computer. Again, these should be layers where you should be able to click on them and get more info. So again, if I want to see a pop-up for this one, it'd be a good idea to just bring this up so that when I click on something, yeah, I'm seeing information related to that. If I can do that real quick. Yes. So now if I click on something, I should, yeah. So 11.4% who have graduated from college but do not have a computer. So the darker blue areas have more of the no computer populations. And then again, depending on what you want to see or infer from the map, there's a variety of different layers that you could look at when comparing it to some of these socioeconomic indicators that we have here. So I'm going to stop with that because we're kind of towards the end. I also want to leave time for questions. But this kind of helps us cover to a great degree all of the different features that we have. There's definitely a lot of use cases, a lot of permutations and combinations of layers that we could be looking at together to get to different inferences. But overall, yeah, pretty much summarizes the new features and how you could use the map. So I'm going to look at the chat now and see if we have any questions.
Shubhika, we started out with a question fairly early on, kind of a general question. asking, has anyone used AI to digest all of this data and then ask it questions?
That's a great question and a great recommendation. Really, I personally have not done it. If anybody in the audience has, yeah, definitely happy to hear that, or feel free to like put it in the chat. But that's, yeah, just, looking at a lot of this data, I think just being able to put it into an automated system and then, ask for inferences or things could yield some interesting results. So definitely worth a shot. And Dr. Ron Soares, if you've also done some of this on your end, and if there's interesting findings that you'd like to share, definitely feel free to pass those along. That'll be
Oh,
interesting.
I'm just in the middle of working on this. I'm working with Randy Lewitting, who does broadbandtoolkit.com. And
Okay.
the question that I've raised with him, because he does these hex maps, and the question I've raised with him is if we just looked at census data to see where the poor people live, wouldn't that be a much less expensive way of finding where we need to build internet? That's, questioning the whole approach. Sorry.
No, definitely something we can look at. Really appreciate the suggestion. And yeah, I think you've given us a good fun project for our free times. If there, you want to have a chat about your findings at any point, happy to do that.
Shubhika, a little while later, another question, a little bit more mechanical question. Is it possible to select multiple hex areas, either separate hexes or contiguous hexes from the same, using the same search criteria?
Ooh,
Uh,
that's interesting. No, we'll not be able to select multiple hexes, really. With this one, just looking at the specific ones when you selected for your speed and technology, how many of the hexes in that particular, sorry, how many of the locations in that hex are served, you can only see that currently. Yeah. So this does not have a multiple hex selection tool. That's going to be something that's part of the PAU selection tool that we have, because the idea there is if there are providers who want to group a bunch of project area units in their project proposal for Connect Illinois Round 4, they'll be able to do that. But with this one specifically, when looking at access by different speeds and technologies, uh, just one hex at a time.
Good, thank you. There's a quick question followed up on that. When you were highlighting St. Clair County, there was an airfield in there, Scott Air Force Base, I believe is what it was. And Faye notes that it's one place. You had commented that it didn't look like it was served by fiber. Faye notes that that's one place that has had access to fiber for years now. It's an Air Force base. So are federal lands excluded from some of this data? Was the question she posed.
I don't think that's the case. If they have some kind of fiber service, that's through mass market options, that should be on there. But if it's like in airfields, I'm assuming if that's like a special provider who has to go through like, I don't know, military broadband or something like that, probably wouldn't be on there. But if there are specific details, we can look into that and just see what's going on. And I'll make a note of who posed that. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me, or I'll reach out to you and just get more information um, and see what's going on with that area.
Devin, any other topics you wanted to address or questions you had seen or some of the questions that you were answering that you wanted to call to everybody's attention?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
have,
just
oh,
go ahead. Yeah.
we in advertising this webinar, we tried to be as clear as we could in kind of the difference between this more general map and then the forthcoming project area unit map for the BEAD program. So we will have lots of BEAD webinars, specifically starting next Wednesday again to cover project area units, application, and all of those details. But I did hopefully address some of the questions in the chat around project area units, which will be the sort of basis for applying for Connect Illinois Round 4 BEAD program.
Greg Klaus just dropped in a helpful note into the chat, noting that the Department of Defense and other federal properties do not show up in FCC broadband data collection maps.
Okay, that's a good note.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Any other questions from anybody out there? Well, Devin, why don't I turn it over to you to close this out?
Shubhika, you want to close it out?
Yeah, no, I'm seeing a lot of PAU questions. Thanks, Devin, for answering those in the chat. Yeah, just want to reiterate there's going to be a separate tool for that coming out soon. That's going to be the source of truth for all of the locations that are eligible for BEAD. And that'll have a lot more functionality looking at the reference cost and just all of the things that have to do with the application process moving forward. But there's still certainly the Illinois Broadband Map could be a helpful tool in just with all of the repository of different data layers that it has on here, the ability to just move around layers, look at them in different combinations, and see if there are specific patterns for different socioeconomic characteristics that kind of define what access looks like for different speeds and technologies. That's certainly helpful. And again, understanding that not everybody might feel comfortable just logging on to a broadband map link and navigating through all of these different data layers on here. So if you're somebody who is kind of, familiar with this and want to share this with groups who might not be super familiar with the tool or comfortable using it, the print feature again would be super helpful so that this information is just like, out there also for folks who are not super comfortable using the map, and just the provider search and all of that hopefully is also super helpful. We are constantly welcoming feedback for, additional information that we could add on here or ways we could make this most useful and easy to use for all folks. So feel free to reach out to us at, I'll put in the chat, illinois@broadband.gov, or I'll also put in my email if you have specific feedback or requests. And if you want to look at a specific county, and yeah, you're not super comfortable using the map yourself, again, that is also, just feel free to reach out to us and we can help you.
And I just want to add to folks that we have a few links that I'm putting now into the chat. Monday, we're going to do the Broadband Breakthrough Infrastructure Planning Program webinar, and wanted to put that link there in the chat. This tool is especially helpful in that process and is included in that planning process, that program. And then upcoming Wednesdays, we are going to resume those BEAD deep dives. And I want to let folks know, Shubhika had mentioned that PAU tool. That's going to be, I think, on January 8. It might be actually 9. Let me see. January 8. So really wanted to just make sure everyone had that information, and didn't know if Devin or Shubhika wanted to make any comments about that also, or anything else you want to cover, Shubhika, of course.
No, I think I have covered most of the functionality here. If there are specific questions, again, feel free to reach out. We're happy to demo it for your specific area or county if that's helpful also. So yeah, thanks for joining today.
And with that, again, Shubhika, thanks so much for the presentation and the information. Thank you to the Office of Broadband and Illinois Broadband Lab for providing such tremendous content for our listeners. And we welcome everybody back to future events. If you'd like to make sure that you're on the mailing list, please drop your email into the chat before you go, and we'll make sure to include you on the mailing list. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.